Welcome back to the Jaunty Mantis. This is a podcast. It's a podcast about tabletop role-playing games. It's a podcast where two curious gamers ask each other creative questions. I have with me my beautiful co-host, Jesse.
Waspinator.
Perfect. Transformers Beast Wars reference. I enjoyed it.
I had nothing to top What's Up, Party People from a recent episode.
That is one of my favorites. Yes.
I was like, should I do German? Nah, I'm good. Old English? Let's get back to that.
It was good. I like that Old English. I am your other co-host, Matty. Jesse, I have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
How do you give good feedback for a role-playing game session?
That's a really tricky question, which I find to be terribly ironic given what we do on this podcast.
Well, you know why I'm asking that question. So in our gaming group, our buddy J5, he's in the GM seat. And at the end of the session, he, asked for feedback. And he did it by saying, if you have anything, if you have any questions or if you have any feedback, let me know. You can send it to me privately or whatever the case may be. And then he said, creative criticism or constructive criticism only. He's like, I don't want to hear only positive stuff. And I thought that was very interesting because running games and playing in games is very creative, and a difficult part of any creative process is getting feedback. Go ahead.
I've tried to do that when I run games with my Roses and Thorns. Which,
explain Roses and Thorns. I love this.
I heard about it from my friend who was a former middle school teacher, and I guess it's a thing they do in class it might be a sorority thing or something. I don't know. But so for the thing that we just did, what are the roses and what are the thorns? And I just, I sometimes like to use language that seems very atypical to me. The wry irony of it defines the yawning void that is my lack of a personality. Like today at work, someone said, I live, laugh, love that. And I'm going to say that all the time now.
That's perfect. So I'm assuming roses are positive things to say and thorns are negative.
Yep.
Okay. Because when you originally said that the first time, I thought it was like something from The Bachelor. Admittedly, a show I've never watched, but it sounded like it'd be something from The Bachelor.
No. Yeah. It's like, what were the roses and what were the thorns?
So when you've asked for roses and thorns, can you give me just an off the top of your head kind of example? You don't have to be perfect in your memory because I know you're on Chantix, but if you could give me an example of a rose and a thorn that you've gotten after asking for that question.
Here's the thing, and why this is a great topic. I've never gotten a thorn.
Oh, okay.
I've never received thorn direct feedback, or I've just blocked it out because they're wrong because I'm perfect. But no, I've when I look for feedback in player reaction and what's happening in the game, on the thorns, I do like to create that. You do that question because I like to have the open door. Obviously, with that group, especially the how shall I say this? The calloused souls of the bunch of hetero cis white dudes in their 40s, we don't get upset by much.
Mm-hmm.
So and I don't think there's also a terrible emotional depth to what we do on Sunday night either.
Yeah.
So it's not just all oh, we're too tough for it. It's we're also risking nothing. So,
yeah,
I anticipated you, audience. Ha ha. Can't catch me there. I know we're shallow. But yeah, I mean, the feedback is usually rules complicated. And people tend to do that between game sessions or in one-on-one chats. But roses are oh, I love this character, or I loved, the pacing, or I loved that fight. That was so cool. I loved when you didn't misread the signs on the rune powder barrel and shot it and exploded and everybody got blowed up. And
yeah, that was fun.
That was a good time.
Yeah. So you've never gotten any thorns?
I've never, I mean, obviously I have heard like things people didn't quite enjoy or weren't as fun about the game, but never when I've elicited them.
Mm-hmm. I've
How about
gotten
you?
some thorns. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to remind you of the one that you gave me, not in a malicious or negative way. This was one of the most helpful things anybody could have told me, which is you described a particular effect of when I run games as something called the mat wall. Do you remember this?
I thought you were having a mental breakdown in that game that we were playing with that,
Okay.
where I first saw that. But
Okay.
yes,
Describe it. Because this was feedback that came from you. The mat wall was something that you brought up to me, which made me rethink everything about how I was running games. And I don't know if I ever fixed it. I feel like I did fix it, or at least made it better, but
I
I
haven't seen
never
a
would
mat wall
have.
in years.
Yeah. If you haven't seen one in the wild, they probably don't exist anymore. But,
Yeah.
so explain what the mat wall is.
Okay, so here's the first time that I think I coined that phrase in my head, but I didn't choose to talk about it at the time because it was a heightened emotional stakes. It was in response to a player that was pretty clearly cheating on dice rolls.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept trying to do the thing with the cheat result, and you're just like, well, then this thing happened, the same thing happens again. And then there's another one. And it went ugly and bad
Mm-hmm.
at our table in our apartment. And I don't think we saw Cheater John again after that.
I mean, I did.
Oh, okay.
I saw him
I
on an L
moved.
train once.
Oh, okay.
We said hi. We were very cordial to each other. He was a very like fun, personable guy outside of game. I just in my head was like very upset at somebody for cheating at Dungeons and Dragons. That's like I mean like I can't think of a more heinous crime in an imaginary game where people sit around a table farting and drinking beer.
uh yeah, I think and so the mat wall, and forgive my Chantix memory because
Sure.
I remember that, and it's just like basically when you get frustrated that people aren't, it's not that people, well, God, my this brain rot of a drug that's helping me not smoke is awful. It's when people get to a stumbling block, there are occasions where I felt like you had a one perfect solution.
Mm-hmm.
And if people didn't do that, you just waited for them to get it. And it was like
Mm-hmm.
running into the mat wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Was that
that's very
what I,
accurate. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I would describe the mat wall as in my previous DMing style or GMing style was that I would set up the obstacles and consequences and then come up with the potential or probable solutions to pass them. And if you didn't do them, guess what? You're not getting past it. And it slows the game down to a fucking halt. And that's like the worst. That is the true worst thing you could do as a GM in a role playing game. One of the worst things you could do as a GM, all things being equal, is bring your game to a screeching halt. And so, but the thing is like I didn't realize that that was a problem, and I didn't realize that there was a better way to run a game. I was just like, yeah, you create problems, you fucking write them down on paper, and then they got to fucking get past them. And if they don't, they don't. And it was like, it never occurred to me that that wouldn't be fun. It never occurred to me that I could put a riddle I found in the internet into a game and people be like, I don't know. Is it water? You already said it was water. Okay. Is it air? Like, is it love? Is the answer love? And you're like, yeah, tough shit. It ain't love, and you're not getting past this fucking fountain, you know, like you know what I mean? So that's what the mat wall was, is it was just like my immaturity as a game master to not realize that this is a collective activity of fun. And that if you place an obstacle in front of the party, you have to be able to work with them in order to get past it. Because if they're coming up dry on everything, it's like, guess what? This game isn't fun anymore. Not for anybody. Because it wasn't fun for me either. And I just needed my friend to point it out. And if you never had, I'd still be doing it to this day.
I think there was one puzzle that you made that very clearly telegraphed putting your hand in this thing will cause these blades to descend and cut your hand off. And
Yeah.
that was the only viable solution to the puzzle, was for
Yeah.
one of us to get our hand cut off. And if we, until we did that, there was going to be no progress. And now I'm remembering Meredith's Book of Vile Darkness alchemist Tweaky. He's the guy that got his hand cut off so we can progress with the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. And before you ask yourself, why would you put into an adventure that you could get your hand cut off and that's the only way to progress past it? I think I had something like later on in the adventure that would like re-give you a hand, but it would be like a magic item. Like, so it'd be like a gold hand or something that you could like get melded onto your stump and then it would give you fucking magic shit. I don't know. In order to kind of make myself look better in this reflection on the past. That's
well,
probably
now I'm like, no,
was.
I'm going to steal that for a Shadow Dark game because that's fucking metal.
Yeah. So, you know,
sorry, Morkborg. I'm going to steal that for a Morkborg game.
Either one works, but Morkborg, yeah, that is the preferred. That's expected in Mork. Yeah. So, you know, I think this episode is very important to me because, you know, that was such a pivotal moment in my evolution as a game master. I feel like we should come up with some, you know, steps or you know, top 5 things you can do to get people to click on this link about your episode about giving good feedback in a D&D game or a role-playing game.
It's a bonus episode. They're fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to think, like, I've made a pretty significant change in my GM style recently, and I'm trying to think if it was player feedback. Yeah, okay. So the player feedback I got was a player quit my game.
The ultimate feedback.
Yeah, the final feedback, and we're still friends. I play in their game, which is once a month. But they said, like, no harm, no foul, but I'm just too busy. We got this new puppy at home. We're trying to train her. She's a fancy dog. Like, I need to be there. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, maybe you're not meshing with my DM style. And then I heard some other feedback, just like, oh yeah, I mean, it was fun. There was a lot of combats and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So it's really interesting because it's some of the same people and it's a total tonal shift. I don't know if this fits our feedback thing, but I want to talk about this.
Okay.
There's a couple things. I think, too, just to start this off as a takeaway, if you're a GM, it's good to ask for feedback, but maybe not count on your players to necessarily give it to you. Unless you want to make like a form or something. You might want to make a form. Like,
yeah, you could do that.
Oh, I got an idea for this. Remind me. Here's the prompt, because again, my brain mush. Things to ask your kids when they get home from school.
Okay.
That's the prompt.
Okay.
Okay, back to this change. God, this is great audio. It's fantastic.
Bonus episode.
In the D&D campaign, the really long 5e published campaign that I ran before this was Descent to Avernus, where the vast majority of the NPCs they meet are straight up devils who want their souls or to trick them or laugh at them. And like, there's not a lot of like super friendly NPCs, not a lot you can trust. And that leads to a lot of combats and a lot of fighting your way across hell. And it was an epic campaign. We did it. They wound up, like redeeming Zariel. Great, good for them. They won. They beat that campaign. Congrats. And so now I'm running the Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And part of this was like, I had a player quit during that other campaign. They had joined late, so it wasn't like they were a starting character, but I had a player quit during that campaign. And I heard, oh, there was a lot of combats, a lot of fightiness, blah, blah, blah. And I read, because it's a Dragonlance game, I reread Dragons of Autumn Twilight.
Great book.
And was like, oh, I had no idea. This is a soft romance novel.
Oh, yeah.
This is all about the feelings between these people.
Yeah.
this is not about dragons and the lance, which is the thing I thought it was when I read it when I was like 10, like dragon riding and lances and they're fighting dragons and I guess people are kissing. Oh, okay. Anyway, oh cool, dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Who don't like dragons. And so I deliberately really leaned into what the adventure module told me to do with the first town, which is just like you need to make the player characters care about this town and these people. And I was like, I think I'm just going to have like all the NPCs but one be like just really nice and
Mm-hmm.
really supportive and not in a sinister way, but just
Right.
like really kind of like emotionally vulnerable and
Mm-hmm.
friendly and supportive and have some advice and like the older like semi-retired knight of the crown that's there, like one of the characters is a knight of the crown who's young just at the start of their knightly career, like has advice for them and blah blah, and they just really seem to like be delighted in just talking to these NPCs that aren't mischievous dicks or demons trying to.
Right. Right. A dig.
And it's been a fantastic experience because it's reminded me I can just put an NPC in because I want to play that NPC.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
want to see what happens when this person needs help, or I want to like, and that there's a whole train of feedback that if someone had just said, "Hey, can you make your NPCs nicer?" I
Yeah.
would have been like, "Fuck you, I'm an artist." No.
That's kind of a staple of games, right? Is like people are like, I don't like that fucking NPC. I've wanted to do this for years to make even the villain, even the big bad, to be this like very relatable, very understandable, very nice person who unfortunately has to do a really terrible thing.
Yeah, like Larry David.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that would I would love that. I think actually, like it's probably I think this is also part of the positive feedback loop of the younger and newer generations of
I
DMs
agree.
who are coming and making all this content,
I
who
agree.
are like I never hear them talk about the combat in their game. They're talking about the angsty emotional role play and the sharing of truths and blah blah blah. And I'm like, I guess I can do that too.
Yeah. I'm
And then I
so
tried it and it's
jealous.
been magical. Like I almost feel bad
Yeah.
for this won't air before our next session. I almost feel bad for the people of Vogler when the Red Dragon Army is about to burn the town down and they have to flee by boat.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm super jealous of the younger generation and how the approach and the uniqueness that they've brought to gaming. You know, I don't want to be your typical straight white guy in control of everything. No, this is the way that it is. I'm a grognard. Gaming can only be this. But at the same time, it's like, God damn it, I wish we had more of that coming up. Because for us coming up, it was all like power fantasy and one upping each other. And, you know, a lot of our current group is awesome. We can go in multiple different directions for more role play or more serious or goof 'em ups or whatever the case may be. But, you know, I wonder what grognard gaming groups would be like if they had that other aspect as a part of their development. You know, it makes me sad that I'm not going to be alive long enough to see how this fully develops in the
Well, I don't think
future.
it's ever going to reach a full developed point. I think it's going to
Really?
continue
Oh,
to
okay.
change. But I have a hot take on that.
Let's hear it.
I think for the younger generation of gaming, this emotional stuff is power gaming. It's power
Oh,
fantasy. It's a
interesting.
power fantasy where I can be honest about my feelings.
I'm laughing because it 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 makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that I don't know if that's coming off as I genuinely think that makes sense.
Yeah,
I'm just
I thought
laughing
that
at
and I'm
how
like,
like straightforward and like right that is.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
I can be as queer as I want. I can love
Right.
who I want. I can talk about it and people will cry or applaud
Mm-hmm. Yes.
instead of just look at me like, yeah, I mean, it's a reaching for power. And it's a power that's probably more fundamentally honest about who they are, but it is still a power fantasy. Because, like, I never actually wanted, okay, no, there was a good period of my life where I was like, it'd be fucking cool to ride a dragon. Um, which tells you about the depths of problems I've had to face in response to my identity. Um, so yeah, yeah. So, oh, the thing, what was the trigger?
Your kids coming home from school.
Okay, I think back to the actual topic.
Mm-hmm.
How can you give good feedback? It has to be elicited,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And if a DM's really interested, there are probably some techniques that they can borrow and employ to help them get that feedback. And a lot of that has to come with targeted questions. So I read a parenting blog when my kids, way before my kids could actually talk to me or before they were going to school, but it was about that, how to talk to kids when they get home from school. Because we can all remember the experience. You come home, you're a crappy preteen or teen. How was school? Fine. And then you disappear into your room. And
Mm-hmm.
I will admit, there is a part of me that cannot wait for that day. Like the first week of that's going to be awesome. Uh, and then I'll feel sad. But it was this questions like, did anything really funny happen today? Was there anybody who was at school that you wish wasn't at school today?
Interesting.
Was there anybody who wasn't at school that you missed today? Like it's how to get them to talk about the people in their interior with these targeted questions that are more than just, there's a specificity there. So like I think in the case of like you run a new NPC that you think is going to stick around for a while. If you want the feedback, you got to be like, hey, what do you think this NPC's vibe is? Or
Mm, gotcha.
what do you think you might do next time you see this NPC? Like just some of those gauging questions. Like, are there any NPCs that, maybe we should leave out of the campaign? Or are there any NPCs from a couple sessions ago that you wonder what they're up to?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there anything we could have done to make the combat go faster? Or is there anything we
Mm-hmm.
needed to do to make this scene last longer? I mean, just I think you got to start with that awareness of the specific areas you're looking feedback on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I wish I've done that in the past. Excuse me. I wish I had done that in the past in that way of asking those specific kind of questions. Because if you want a specific answer, you should ask a specific question, right? But you shouldn't ask it as in like, does my NPC suck? You know what I mean? Like, because there's always NPCs that are annoying, but like that's part of their appeal and charm in the story. Is
Yeah.
like they are working as intended. You know, they are the dwarven scholar who shows up with scrolls in her bag and is just talking at a mile a minute and has an answer for everything and almost seems a bit dismissive. And then one of the player characters says, I think I hate her. It's like,
I think the player character said, I'm debating on whether to murder her in her
oh yeah,
sleep or not. Yeah. So
yes. Yeah. Okay. But I don't think that means that it's a bad NPC and they don't like what the DM is doing with that character. I think
yeah,
that's
the
just
DM is clearly leaning in that
right.
direction and doing a
Exactly.
great job on that characterization of
It's working as intended. Yeah.
yeah.
I think what I would add is like if what you said is number one, right? So the number one is if you're the GM, ask pointed questions, ask specific questions to get specific answered, right? I think number two falls on the shoulders of the player and it also involves questions. And this is, something you get in some cases taught for creative writing. If you like sit around and part of a writing workshop, your writing gets read or you read your writing in front of a group of people, it can be difficult to give feedback. And the best way to do that is often by asking a question. What would happen if this character, showed up earlier? And so I would like to apply that as a player, right? if you want to give your GM feedback, ask it in a question. What could we get more of X? What would happen if, we moved on from the town that we're in? Do you think that's something we could do? You know? So asking questions from the other side, I think, could also be a valuable way to give feedback. What would happen if there was less combat and more interaction with the mayor and his wife? You know what I mean? Or I really liked this sequence where we were jumping from wagon to wagon over the bridge that was falling apart. What would happen if we, could we get more chase sequences, or could we get more like live in the moment pulp action like that? You know, and if you kind of focus it more in a positive, as far as your questioning from player to GM as a way to give feedback, then you're more likely to give them what is being asked for in the sense of constructive criticism, but it's handled in a very positive way. Like, you're not saying like your combats are boring, we need more exciting combat. Well, what does that mean exactly? What kind of combat is exciting to you? Right? So if you can find a way to phrase it as a question, maybe that helps the process along. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's some pretty great advice. Yeah, if you're looking to give some feedback, phrase it as a question.
Mm-hmm.
Could we? I mean, you've tried to do this with that group too, because like we get wrapped up in things and scenes. I feel like sometimes take longer than they need to.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not to the benefit of the story necessarily. So like, could we, agree, you've proposed this before, on a signal that we're done, we're good.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise I'm just going to keep throwing the door open and being like, I throw open the door and walk outside. Like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I do want to say this too, just praise, like, I don't know if Johnny Five's ever run an investigation game before, but you know what I did last night?
Took notes.
I took copious notes.
Nice.
I have like the plan for this investigation charted. I've got like stop one, here are the clues, like blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm into it. I am into it. And I'm already sad that my main thesis that it was Dwergar has been, they're involved. Those shady fucks just hanging out in the Underdark, calling everybody a twat and a shit stain.
Uh-huh. Thank you, Baldur's Gate 3.
I love thinking of Dwergar as being like lawful, evil, underground tyrants that just call everybody a twat.
Yeah. I like to think of Dwargar as basically the characters from the HBO show Veep, just in a medieval fantasy Underdark setting. So, okay. So we have two forms of, requesting feedback and proposing feedback, and both involve questions. What are some other ways that you can give good feedback to your dungeon master or game master?
I think from a player, I don't know that this is a question, but it's one of the things that, are pretty hefty delve into Kevin Crawford gave me is I am going to try to say at the end of the session, every session now, hey, next session, I'm planning on doing this. Or be like, hey, or be like, reminder, my character is from the Forgotten Realms. They are a unique artifact constructed by a crazy wizard in the far south, and he is very much still alive and probably wants his shit back. Like that requires, and god damn, it is hard, I think, for people of our generation to have a player goal, to feel that sort of agency in the world, to say, I got my own plans, but make them. They might not happen. That's okay. That's story. Like, one of the things I'm going to do, and this is why actually for like Harrow, setting this up, why I asked her if she has access to a library in Neverwinter, this dwarf NPC who's obviously a scholar, is like, I'm gonna like when we get extra gold, and this again inspired by a Ziba Shu video,
Mhm.
I'm gonna send off to a city to hire some researchers to look into like how you defeat a powerful wizard. Like,
Mhm.
is there a magic item or something? Like just, hey, free plot hook insert, and I'm spending money to get
Mhm.
an arc of the campaign for us by engaging in the world. Cause like Harrow is very concerned.
Yeah.
And this all came from making that playlist when I was like, all the songs about being free. I was like, oh yeah, he doesn't want to go back. Like he's very concerned about that dude showing up, killing his friends.
Mhm. Mhm. I love it. Uh it reminds me of something I saw, I think, on the Dungeon Craft YouTube channel, Professor Dungeon Master. This is part of I think what he does, if this is somebody else, I apologize, but I think it's him. And this is gold. This is absolute gold. What he does, and this is in an in-person setting, so there's a virtual way to do it as well. But what he does is when he starts a campaign, he gives everybody a little notebook, little thin, small, color coded, or it's got the names of the characters written on the front of it or whatever. Gives every player character a notebook. And then at the end of every set, he said, feel free to write notes in here of things about the session. And then at the end of every session, write down 3 things you want to see or do in the future, in the next session, in the next 3 sessions, whatever. Right? Then he collects all the notebooks. Then guess what he does? He fucking reads them.
Yep.
And then he uses that to craft the game around what the player characters want. And I think that's a great way to get feedback from your players without actually saying to them, hey, can you give me feedback? Or if you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. It's like the players will give you the feedback you're looking for, right? Like if maybe somebody writes in that notebook, I want to kill those goblins. Well, they're obviously looking for more combat, right? They're looking, to test their metal against enemies, right? That's a great way based on what you had said earlier in order to elicit feedback in a very constructive way, right? Because then they're just literally telling you what to do with the rest of the game moving forward. You just do that
Yeah.
every session.
I'm doing that.
You're doing that?
I'm doing that now. Um, this is one of my great regrets about the Soulbound campaign is I don't think I did a good enough job explaining the experience gain system and the personal goal and the party goal. Because like you
Mm-hmm.
guys probably should have been ticking off a personal goal every other session or so. Um, while the party goal, like, because, and that's the thing, I made a mistake of running it with this pre-made adventure module because I'm like trying to hit the beats of that. Because that is the party goal
Mm-hmm.
to do this, but that's long term. Like that's a campaign arc, the party goal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Personal goals fill the day to day. And I think that that game is designed to have you chasing your personal goals with the possible risk of the doom counter going up because you're ignoring the major like it that is how it's structured to do that. Make a choice, your personal shit or doom.
Mm-hmm.
um and I don't think I leaned into that part, which is probably one of the better mechanics of it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That we for that game we could have definitely used more hand holding and maybe even made parts of the gaming experience explicitly about that, which you started to do towards the end of it. And is one of the reasons why I was the one dissenting vote against changing your game to Rifts. Because when we started to work on personal goals, that's when things started to click into place for me for this character. Is, they got a Stormcast Eternal who's been remade a bunch of times, and he is coming to terms with his own lack of freedom as presented to him by somebody who is a prisoner in a prison, right? And it's like messing with him mentally, and he's questioning everything as a result. So I would definitely agree with that for sure.
So I think that just like three things you want to do or a personal goal, maybe
Hmm.
have maybe steal that, and
Hmm.
whatever your advancement or XP system is like a lot of story games do that though. Like, did you work on your personal goal? Get XP.
Right.
Um, but yeah, if you're in 5e that doesn't, yeah, why not toss that or mark a clock on a milestone, if you're using like loose milestones or something for that. Because that is as much feedback, like I've said, as like the skills people picked that
Hmm.
they want to do. That's also feedback.
Yeah. What
And I think
about, oh, go ahead.
throwing that back to like Mike Shea, the step 2 review the characters for the lazy
Hmm.
dungeon master, like that is also player feedback. That is, what you write on your character sheet is feedback for your DM.
Right. Right. What about your traditional forms of feedback? But
Customer
simplified.
satisfaction survey, net
Yeah.
promoter score. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask. What if you put a survey in front of your gaming group? I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just saying, like, let's just go through your traditional forms of getting feedback, right? So, like, let's put, you've got 5 points, you've got like a 5, a 4, a 3, a 2, and a 1, right? 5 best thing ever. 1 uh definitely needs some work, maybe even overhaul this particular thing, right? And then you just put them, combat, role play, puzzles, all the other things you're looking to get feedback on. And then just ask your players to rate that at the end of the session, or at least at the end of an arc, or whatever the case may be. Do you think that would be effective?
Yeah. If people
Okay.
did the survey, I mean, like obviously this is a qualitative survey that you might be using quantitative measures for, because your sample size is so small. You're not going to see any trends or patterns.
Hmm.
But if people are doing it and doing it honestly, um, and that might even be motivation. The people that do it start to see the shit they want happen more of the time, and they're having more fun than you. So just fill out the survey, and then you can have that fun too. Um, yeah, I think that probably is a good way to go.
I mean, you could do it where it was like, what was your favorite thing and least favorite? And then you put it on a scale, right? So combat, there's a scale of 1 through 5. 5 is this is the most fun, 1 is the least fun. I think and I mean it could be worth a try, but I think the inherent problem is that people lie on surveys. That's why polling is such a mess in 2024 when it comes to all sorts of things, including politics. But like, um, you know, so I don't know how effective that would be, because really the problem we're facing is you want constructive criticism. Your players don't want to piss you off because you're running the game, right? So it's like a loaded situation, right? Because it's like you could be my friend, you could be like one of my best friends. I don't want to make you upset. You're devoting extra time, resources, and energy to run the game in the first place. Why would I risk losing the DM? You know what I mean? There's a shortage of dungeon masters or game masters apparently. So like, why would I risk losing you as the person running a game by giving you quote unquote constructive criticism, right? It's inherently an untrustworthy process. I think the only thing you like, even if you did an anonymous form where it's like, hey guys, anonymous form, it's not going to ask you for your name. You can put whatever you want in there. I can't be offended. Just write whatever you think would be helpful, right? You may get a couple of people who are really honest, but I think the vast majority of people are still not going to want to piss you off because we're dependent on you providing us with this experience. So even if there is something that I'm not exactly liking, why would I risk making you upset? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like it's one of the things too about our friendship is I feel like we've been friends so long. I'm grandfathered into I'm allowed to make you upset,
Yeah.
but it's
Well,
it's still terrifying. Like
well,
so,
if like, look, you've given me the best gaming feedback I could have gotten with the mat wall, and it made me into a better game master, I think. It
I think
taught
so
me
too.
it taught me how to develop improvisational gaming skills. It taught me patience. It taught me that there's more ways to have fun. It taught me that like putting untappable obstacles in the path of the players is not a good idea, you know? So it's like, I don't know, maybe if you have a Jesse, like I do a fair amount of creative writing on a personal level, which I don't release publicly.
Do you
We're
pick a place, any place?
and I have a writing partner, somebody who does actually publish. They write middle grade comics, and he and I have much of an understanding that you and I have, Jesse, where it's like if you want the best, most honest feedback, you're just going to have to accept a level of trust between you. And that's not easy to gain with a gaming group, because it makes things more serious. But with my writing partner, like he's looking for me to be as honest as possible, and he knows I'll give it to him. So if I tell him I like something, he trusts it. If I tell him I don't like something, he knows I'm being honest with him and that I'm not trying to hurt his feelings, right? So I guess that maybe that's what we should end on is like, how do you just phrase feedback? Like if J5's like, give me constructive feedback right now, like what is the best way to actually respond to that? You know? Is it is
Okay.
it with the hope sandwich or whatever? The positive, negative with a positive?
I think positive and then but.
Okay, give me an example.
Like specifically about that game.
You don't have to do it specifically with that game, but if you want to, it's just fresh of mind and he's asking for criticism.
I was really, really engaged in the mystery, but I wish that the inn that we burned down had still been burned down.
Okay.
Because one
Okay.
of Harrow's goals was to rebuild it. Like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay.
that was a whole later story arc I had planned for him, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's okay. I can see that. I think if I was going to give him criticism and or not criticism, constructive criticism or constructive feedback, I would say that after coming back to these characters, and maybe this is piggybacking on what you just said, but like after coming back to these characters, there is a disconnect. It's been over a year since we played these characters, and I was surprised at the amount of stuff that everybody else seemed to remember, and myself included. Like my character is a goblin monk who has a document that another character forged for him that in the document says my goblin is actually a human, and he presents it to people who are like, oh my god, it's a goblin. He's like, no, I'm a human, I'm a real person. Here, I have the documentation to prove it. And I totally forgot I had that because I never put it on my character sheet. And then spontaneously out of nowhere, we're playing the game and I'm like, oh yeah, Scavos made this document for my character, right? So I think my constructive criticism or feedback would be like, I think we need more of a pointed direction on what we should be doing instead of being like, you could go here, you could go here, you could go here, you could go here, which is my biggest criticism of sandbox style gaming in general. I think because there was such a gap in between when we played these characters last, just getting a general refresher of like, this is what happened, this is what's happening now, you are going here next, and then you'll be able to choose any route after that. Because otherwise, it kind of felt like we're just kind of like all up in the air. And then Scavos is going and doing his own thing. And that's creating a hilarious event, which then comes back to the party, which all worked out in the end. And we all had fun anyway. So if I had to give any kind of feedback, I'd be like, maybe we need to be on the rails a little bit to just focus in a direction, and then we can branch out there once we all get back into the swing of things.
Oh, I've got the rails. I've got them right here.
Jesse's holding up his notes.
Yeah, I've got stop two is the well. And I think we need to do that before we go to the end.
Gotcha.
Not
Okay.
delve into it, just examine it.
Yeah, I think we've been presented with a lot of different things we could do. And maybe we should have been presented with like 3, or maybe 2. Do this one or this one. All right, listeners, if you have any feedback or creative criticism or constructive criticism, or maybe you just don't like the sound of my voice, that's fine. You can contact us at jauntymantis@gmail.com. I think we also have social media. That seems to be an ongoing thing of maybe it's Twitter.
I look
Jawanty
at it every
Mantis.
once in a while. I'm not using it. No one's using it to talk to us, but I look at it.
Yeah. And if you want to support the show at all, a great way to offer us feedback is with a starred review on fucking Apple Podcasts, because maybe you don't like using Apple Podcasts, but it is still the gold standard and how the show is distributed and how many people can get put in front of. So if you want to do us a solid, go, and you like the show, go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a starred review. It doesn't have to be a 5-star review unless you really like us, and then definitely put a 5-star review.
I mean, I really like us, so I don't see why anybody else wouldn't. I just.
And until then, Jesse, what's our famous catchphrase?
Get out there and give some fucking constructive criticism or some shit.
That's right. Get out there and ask a creative question alluding to a problem you might have in a game in order to soften the blow so that your GM doesn't quit and you guys stop having fun because you couldn't keep your goddamn mouth shut.
Synthwave music.